You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to True Wealth. I'm Dave Basconi, and here with me is Maria Smith. Hello, Maria. How are you today?
Doing pretty well. Dave, how about yourself?
Doing fine now. A few days ago, not so well. I have a question for you, Maria. Just came to mind. How much water do horses drink?
What a great question. As much as they can, as much as they need.
Yeah, well, here's the answer based on my experience last week. A whole lot of water, especially when you don't have any. And as we were talking before the show, the storm that blew through last week knocked out our power, and therefore we had no water. And I think most horse owners know that horses drink a lot of water. But when you have to go get it from, 40 minutes away and haul it back, that's when you realize how much water horses drink. A lot more than you always thought when it was there at the barn.
With people, if you don't have water, you could drink something else. But with horses, they need their water, and that's all they need to drink.
Oh, that's all they will drink. And
exactly.
Although if you go down there with beer and you put a little beer in your hand, they'll lick it out of your hand because of the grain in the beer. Did you know that?
Right. Oh, no, I didn't know that, no. But they won't drink beer, will they?
No, but it's like a treat. It's like giving them a carrot. Yeah. And not all horses will do it. But I don't like to pour too much beer in my hand because that's less beer for me. But if it's in your hand, and they'll lick it out of your hand because, like I said, it has the grain taste to it, and they're okay with it. But it's actually a good lesson about how we tend to take things for granted. We just don't realize when it's easily available how much we use of things. And it's only when it becomes scarce or you have to work to get it that you start to figure out ways, okay, maybe I can use less of this, or I can repurpose this, or I can maybe use it twice instead of once. It's not a bad lesson. I think if we all had a few issues where we had to think about how we use things and how much we use, could be a little better world, I think.
Yeah, and it's exactly, if we appreciated what we have, that's actually an excellent topic for any show too. Appreciation, gratitude. I know we've covered it in other shows as well, but we don't appreciate the simple things like water, electricity, power until it's gone, and then, oh my goodness, especially water. I mean, even horses can't live without water, but neither can human beings really for very long. So we really don't appreciate, and we should be thankful we have, especially those of us with wells, but even those with city water, we have better water now than people ever had. Mm-hmm. Beautiful, fresh. Oh, yeah. Although I do think then sometimes, if they came upon a very clear, pristine spring fountain of water, there were times there too. But there's an awful lot of times that humans had to drink water that really, and still do in certain countries and certain places, water that's really less than desirable.
Yeah, and I think another something to your point there about you could find good, clean water maybe somewhere in the world, and but the convenience of getting that good, clean water to where you wanted it may not be there. You may have to carry it a distance, whereas we have good, clean water, and it's convenient. You turn on the faucet and fill up a glass or whatever. So we have the best of both of those. Is that it's
That's
good,
an excellent point.
And it's convenient. Whereas other people, it may be good and clean, but if you got to carry it a distance, that's work.
That's an excellent point. I didn't really think of that. I mean, I have thought of it in the past, but not quite that way. That's so true, because even if there is this beautiful, fresh, clear, clean water, even if it's only a few feet away, you have to go outside of your house. You have to go get it. We are so fortunate. All we do is turn on the tap.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. Water is heavy. I think it's 8.3 pounds. I knew the exact weight of water many years ago. I think it's 8.3 pounds per gallon or somewhere in there. So if you've got 5 gallons in a bucket, you've got over 40 pounds, probably close to 45 pounds of by the time you throw in the weight of the bucket. And if you're carrying 2 5-gallon buckets full of water, which I was doing last week, that's 90 pounds. And you hustle those things back and forth, and at the end of the day, you're starting to feel it a little bit. Again, I'm not complaining. I'm just making a point that when you can fill a bucket at the barn and just put it on the stall, on the hook there, and then that's it, you're done, versus going to get it, bringing it back, being very careful to ration it. The horses were keeping their water in their buckets a little longer. Usually I throw out, something that may have been in there for a few overnight or something like that, but I didn't have extra. So we just left it in there, and they're fine. I mean, these horses are being treated a little nicer than a lot of other horses, but, if you can give them fresh water, do it. But if you can't, they're fine with what's in the bucket. As long as it's wet, they're fine with it.
Yeah. It's true about all that you were saying, how much more difficult it was to get the simple things in life, how much more physically demanding. And in times past, people, both men and women, had to work much harder physically, so much harder. But they did not have to work anywhere near as hard intellectually. And I also don't believe anywhere near as hard emotionally as we do nowadays, for various reasons. They did have to work much more physically. But even in working physically, and I think that for some people it would have been easier than for others, depending on their capabilities. Just like right now, in our present world, for some people intellectually, it's much easier than for others. So the same in the past. For some people, it was easier to do physically demanding work. But you also got a certain I don't even know what the word is, pride perhaps, a certain confidence of doing this heavy work. And also your body felt good. I think nowadays we have a problem with so many people who are sedentary, and some people go to the gym, which is okay, but the best kind of physical exercise, at least from what I've seen and from read, is really the kind of exercise that's incorporated into your day, that involves more fresh air, that involves more of using all your muscles, not something that's just go to the gym for a 20 or a 30 or a 40-minute workout and then you're done a few times a week or even every day. So physically, people had to really, it was much more demanding in the past. But now it's more demanding in another way. Life has always been very difficult. It can never, ever, this life as we know it, this earth, this world, can never be easy, no matter what certain people, certain secular people, humanists say. Oh, when we get this vaccine, when we get this medication, when we get this new technology, when we can cure cancer and wipe out cancer, we can cure this and wipe this out. No, we should work towards the betterment of humanity, trying to wipe out disease, trying this, more better ways of dealing with people's emotional and psychological problems as well as physical problems. And, of course, the spiritual issues. We should be working towards all that is good for humanity, but with the realization that we can never, ever, ever have a perfect world here. It's not meant to be, and it can't be.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. As a matter of fact, you said a couple of things. I made a couple of notes. One is the idea of going to the gym for exercise. To me, as soon as someone says, and I'm not being critical because we all have, different callings in life, and some people have just indoors all day. But if you're going to a gym, that pretty much, I think, suggests that you're not working outside. You're not getting that physical, demanding work to keep your body in shape because you're inside. So therefore, you have to go to a gym or you run. You go for a run when you get home or something like that. You do something to compensate for the fact that you're not doing this demanding physical work, because I think someone who's put in a good day doing physical work doesn't go to the gym. They probably don't go for a run because they've already done that part that they need for their health in their work. So, like I said, life is a lot different than it used to be. I can't imagine 200 years ago when people lived on farms and, were cutting down trees to build log cabins and all of this, that somebody says, well, geez, I got to go to the gym, or let me go for a run. I would think that by the end of the day, as soon as it got dark, you collapsed into bed and got ready to get up at sunrise and do it all over again. So I'm thinking that's how exercise was done back then. It was through your work. But does that sound about right? Is that the point?
Exactly. Yeah. Through your work. Exactly.
Yeah. Here's something else. And you said that life is never going to be without some kind of pain or suffering or anything like that, because it just shifts. It goes from one kind of pain or suffering or demand to another kind. And I'll tell you right now, I've found that in my own experience with other things, believe it or not, in the world of physics. My job years ago was at a company where you could design a product. This was an electrical cable. I won't go into a lot of detail because it's not needed. But here's the thing. You wanted something, you wanted certain parameters in that particular product, so you stated those. But then you got what else that you had no control over. In other words, you get something, you give up something. If you wanted a lot of power to be pumped through this cable, then that product was going to be rather large. If you wanted size was the main thing, then you couldn't get much power through it. So you want something, you give up something. I even found that in the world of photography. I used to mess around with that quite a bit, and this was before the digital stuff. And even when you go to, when you would set your focus, if you wanted clarity deep into the scene, you had to set it at a certain aperture, which meant that it took longer for the light to strike the film. If you wanted something very quick, you went to a bigger aperture, which was a very quick shutter speed. However, you lost a lot of depth. Your focus was just on your main subject, and everything else in front or behind was kind of blurry. Now, that actually could work in your favor. So if you knew all the parameters of the camera, then you used it to get the look you wanted. And but anyhow, once again, Maria, you want something, you get something, you give up something. And I learned from those experiences in the physical world, in the natural world, if you will, that that's the way it is for us. I kept hearing this commercial many years ago, you can have it all. Remember that commercial? Mm-hmm. I think it was for a credit card or something. And I was always just kind of snickering. You can't have it all. You think you can, but if you get something, you have to give up something.
Yes. Yes, that's great. That's excellent. Yes, you brought in physics and you brought in photography, and it really can apply to anything. It can be applied to relationships, and it can be applied to your focus. If you focus on material things, on worldly things, you're going to give up the spiritual. You cannot do both. You really can't focus on both. You can do a little bit of one, but you're focusing on the other. If you focus on the spiritual, you have to give up a lot that is material. You just cannot serve both. You can't do both. You have to, and that's exactly what sacrifice is. Sacrifice is giving up something, something that is good, for something that you believe is better. If you give up your spiritual dimension, because you think that what the world is offering, money, honor, pleasure, you think it's better. That's why you're giving up the spiritual. But you know that every human being does have a spiritual. But the more you give it up, the more you press it down, the less you can acknowledge it and be aware of it. But the opposite is also true. The more you focus on the spiritual, the more you focus on eternity and not just the 80, 90, or 100 years or so that a human person has here on earth, you have to give up a lot of the material. And it's not easy. Sacrifice is never easy. Sacrifice, that's why it's called sacrifice. It's hard. We don't want to give up certain things, but the human person will give up certain things for something they believe is better. Even a drug addict, they'll give up what they know is good for their health because they believe it's better for them to be medicated, to escape from their issues, their problems. They believe it's giving them relief to escape from what's hurting them or causing them distress. So for them, it's whatever people do, they're always seeking happiness. They're always seeking what they deem is the better portion. But many times people are wrong.
Well, that's it. And I guess that gets back to how do you put a value on what is better? How do you value one thing over another? And, for example, let's use the spiritual, we would call that joy versus the secular pleasure. How much do you value joy over pleasure? Because there's nothing wrong with pleasure if it's done under the right conditions, for the right reasons. For example, eating is a pleasure. But if we overeat because we've, lost control, or it's something we go to reduce the pain. Or it could even be shopping, for example. I don't like to shop. Some people do. So some shopping is necessary, of course. And if that's what you find pleasure in, that's fine. But once again, if the pleasure is put ahead of joy, then you are going to be tied to the secular world, because that's what the secular world, the culture, gives us, or tries to give us, and tells us that every day, is we're getting pleasure. Whereas if we're looking at the spiritual, we're thinking in terms of joy, and joy comes from, as you were saying, making the sacrifice, because we know that when we give up certain things in the spiritual, that the joy will come from a supernatural source. When you boil it all down, for me, that's pretty simple, but I think for a lot of people, they may not see it that way.
Yeah, that's true. People don't see it that way because pleasure is quick. It's immediate, or at least much quicker, much more immediate than joy. In the short run, pleasure is there. Joy only comes in the quote-unquote long run, the long haul. You have to be patient for it. You have to practice virtue to get joy. You have to do things that go against human nature. Be kind to certain people when you don't feel like being kind to them. Forgive people when you don't feel like forgiving them, because it goes against your human nature. Somebody's done wrong to you. You don't feel, your human nature revolts against forgiving them. They've hurt you. They've struck your dignity. No. In the short run, it's pleasurable not to forgive. It's pleasurable to lash out at somebody. It's pleasurable to have what you want when you want immediately. But joy comes from doing the right thing, which is hard at the moment. It's hard at the moment, and you only get rewarded for it later on. Pleasure, you get rewarded for it in the moment, but it's hard later on. Whether it's eating, whether it's drinking, whether alcohol, or even just drinking a lot of soda, a lot of things that don't have alcohol content. Whatever it is, smoking, drugs, whatever it is that gives you immediate pleasure, could be shopping, could be anything. Whatever it is that gives you immediate pleasure, if you don't exercise virtue with this pleasure, in the long run, it's going to give you sorrow. Whereas with joy, in the short run, it'll give you hardship. In the long run, it gives you joy. It's the opposite. And I think human beings recognize this. I think they recognize it deep down inside. I think it's part of their natural law. It's an inherent part of the human nature that we know what's right, what's wrong, and we know that what's right will ultimately be the best for us, and what's wrong will ultimately harm us. We know that deep down, but we still choose to do the wrong thing because of the lack of virtue.
Yeah, exactly. Matter of fact, one thing I heard about the difference between pleasure and happiness is pleasure, and let's use the eating. When we stop doing what's giving us pleasure, the pleasure stops. For example, eating. When you finish the meal, the pleasure of eating stops. Whereas happiness is something that goes beyond when you stop doing the activity. For example, let's say you had a choice. Do I go grab a snack at an ice cream stand, or do I work out? You're at a crossroads. And you need the exercise. You don't need the ice cream. However, the ice cream is the pleasure, and the workout is the pain. And you choose the ice cream. Well, once you finish the ice cream, the pleasure stops. However, if you were to have chosen the workout, it's hard, but an hour later, after a good, rigorous workout, you're happy. And that happiness will carry on for some time because you feel better, you know you did the right thing for your body, so the happiness is lasting, whereas the pleasure is, as you were saying, in the moment. Yeah.
As you were speaking, I thought what you were saying was the pleasure is temporary. The happiness or joy is eternal. The pleasure is natural to our nature, to our human bodies, and the joy and happiness is supernatural. It's above the human nature, the human body, the earthly component.
Yeah. Well, and that's how you start to build the argument, I think, for a spiritual life, the benefits of a spiritual life, and bringing in the supernatural, bringing in God, and then all the parts that make up the what you believe. I really think it gets down to those simple choices. Pick one, and the one that you spend the most time with is going to be the master of the two. It's either going to be the pleasure and the culture, or it's going to be the joy and the spiritual. One's going to be the master, and one's going to just get whatever time is left over, if there's any time left over. It's with the pleasure, because people that are spiritual understand they need time for pleasure. So they'll have both, but in the right proportion and in the right order. Whereas the people that choose strictly put pleasure first, they may not have that balance. They might not have that spiritual side at all. And or if they do, it could be a small part. That's kind of what I see going on around me. Does that sound familiar at all?
Yeah, it certainly does. Pleasure is really a byproduct. Pleasure is a byproduct of doing the right thing at the right time. And yes, you can go to the beach and have pleasure. You can have ice cream and have pleasure. But if you're doing these things at the wrong time, instead of doing your chores, your duty, you just say, I'm not going to do the work. I don't care. Or go into your job. I'm just going to go to the beach. That pleasure is not done correctly. So pleasure is a byproduct of living a life that's correct, that's in order, that's rightly ordered to God's laws. And so even with work, if you're doing work and you're doing it well, you will find some pleasure in it. If you're out in the fields and you're doing hard manual labor, you'll find pleasure in it. If you're in an office and you're composing some software or whatever it is that you're doing, some graphics, you will find pleasure in doing that work, in doing it well, in seeing the creativity. Or even if it's more of a humdrum thing, let's just say it's something that people can say is very tedious, washing dishes. I mean, some people actually enjoy cooking and find that to be pleasurable, but not too many people enjoy washing dishes. I'm sure that there are some. But even washing dishes can be pleasurable. I mean, feeling the water running over, seeing the dishes get clean. No matter what it is, product of an activity, if we allow it to. If we're doing something resentfully, going to the office resentfully, going to the fields to work resentfully, washing dishes or cooking or anything resentfully.
Maria, are you breaking up?
No, I'm not, but I didn't quite hear you. Was I breaking up for you?
Well, no, there was a delay. I didn't know
if
I had lost you or there was a problem. Or if you were just, it was just a little time between thoughts, that's all. As you were talking, the one thing that I think if I were talking to someone about this, because I think you're right, that people can find pleasure in their work. A lot of people do, especially if you're doing the job that you have always dreamed of doing. You could be a successful artist. I could see the pleasure in that, or let's say you're a successful graphics designer, and it's what you wanted to do forever, and now you're doing it, making a living at it. But the one thing I would change, because I tend to associate pleasure with more of the appetite kind of a thing, I would probably use the word happiness. If I were talking to someone, that a person in the field doing very hard work, if that's what they were called to do, or let's say they worked in an office and they hated it, and now they work in a field, and they might say, I feel I'm much happier now doing this hard work in the field. So I think work done the right way and the right work, depending on the person, is absolutely a source of happiness. And to me, if you've got that balanced in with your spiritual, that's where happiness, I think, kind of even grows into what we were calling joy. Joy, I think, is even a level above happiness. It comes from another source beyond just our own efforts doing what we love to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm quite in agreement with you. I do think that I would put it this way, that if we do the work, not so much that we choose or that we feel is we're most suited to. It can be that, but I think there's even a higher a higher element, a higher calling. If we are doing the work that we believe God has called us to, and it can be washing dishes, we can derive pleasure and even happiness from doing simple, menial tasks. And I think this goes to what Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa of Calcutta said. It's not how great the work, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's not the greatness or the magnitude of the work that you're doing. It's the greatness of the love that you put into it. So, I mean, even doing dishes or constructing a bridge, whatever you're doing, if you're doing it for God's glory, God's honor, for our Lord, for the love of your family, if you're doing it for love, if you're doing it with the right attitude, you can derive pleasure in some way. Like I was saying, even with washing dishes, you can find some pleasurable aspects to it. It can be tedious, it can be difficult scrubbing things, but you can still find that. I think that we've lost that quality in modernity because we think that things should be fun in and of themselves. But I do believe that fun or pleasure is often a byproduct of doing the right thing. And actually, I'm going to even put this in the in other realms too, with relationships. Relationships are hard, and we look for relationships to give us fun, to give us pleasure, whereas relationships are difficult. And if we have that perspective on any relationship, whether it's a marital relationship or a friendship relationship or a work relationship, they're difficult. And if we go into it with that perspective that it's difficult, we can derive pleasure, happiness from it. But if we go into a work relationship, this is going to be great, this is going to be fun, this is going to be great, this is what I've always wanted to do, you're going to find difficulties there. Marriage, this guy or this woman is going to make me so happy, or the children are, or friendship, the best, everything is fun, everything is pleasurable. No, you go into it because love is a difficult thing. Relationships are difficult. And when you tackle the difficulties inherent in all of human life, especially in relationships, then you will find the pleasure and the joy.
Yeah, now that you've explained it that way, I think we're kind of splitting hairs on the definitions here. I think there's, overlap. If you're getting pleasure from something that you should be doing, the right work, that overlaps happiness, and which I guess, overlaps joy. I guess secular pleasure that's not necessarily good for you, or as you mentioned, alcohol or drugs. That's if something is giving you pleasure but is harming you in any way, physically or mentally or spiritually, that's not a good kind of pleasure. So if it feels good, but it's what you should be doing, and it brings happiness and ultimately the joy that we're all looking for, then I would say the fruit it's good fruit, it's bearing good fruit, and therefore it's the right kind of pleasure, as opposed to, like I said, maybe what we're being manipulated into by the culture, by the marketplace, and we end up miserable. And maybe that's the scale to use. Are you going toward the misery index or to the happiness part of the scale? So once you figure that out, you'll know if you should be doing it or not, and how it all fits.
Yeah.
But I think we're talking about the same thing. Sometimes it just gets down into definitions of how people.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But now going back to last week, we were talking about. One of the things that came up last week that we thought we might continue on this week is the problem of evil.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So with the problem of evil and fear, and one way to look at it would be that fear and evil are really conquered not by more fear or more evil, but through love. Through love, we can...
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was saying, yes, we did touch on that. But go ahead, finish your introduction there, and go ahead.
Well, yeah, with the problem of evil, it's there is suffering, there is evil in the world, but love conquers all suffering, all evil. But again, it's through that hardship, it's through that suffering that we get to the other side. We don't have, and it could not be a perfect world here. There's only one perfect world with no pain, no suffering, no evil, and that's in the other world. That's in heaven. That's after this world. This world is a testing ground, a battlefield. And there's evil, and the way to conquer it is through love. And love is not some kind of weak, sissy thing. True love is a really strong thing. You have to be tough on yourself. You have to persevere. You have to combat your faults. You have to get up each and every day and do your very best to conquer the weaknesses that you have and to use your strengths to the best of your ability.
So you're saying love, if it's done right, is it takes work. It can be a tough love sometimes in some cases, which is needed. It's not just giving in to someone's demand that shows that you love them. Sometimes it might be objecting to all their demands because, as we were saying earlier, if it's the wrong kind of activity that is bearing bad fruit, then someone who loves you would tell you that to stop doing it because you're harming yourself and others. So what you're doing is you're defining love as the right response when you're dealing with others in your life. Is that a reasonable way to say it?
I actually really like that. Yes, the right response to people in your life. Yes. I like that a lot. Yeah, because that's exactly what it is. And you know what? That's such a difficult thing. That is such a difficult thing to have the right response, because the right response can hurt. The right response can cause conflict. The right response can cause you to get into a lot of trouble, whether it's in relationships or out in the world. The right response, that's really difficult. And, for myself, and I think for everybody, but definitely for myself, I know that I could never, ever, ever have the right response without God. Because in and of myself, I am absolutely, positively not strong enough to have the right response. I don't like conflict. I don't like having to tell people when I believe that their demands are overbearing, unreasonable. I don't like that. I would rather just give in, personally.
A lot of people are like that. And
yes.
It may be a little bit gender related, not in all cases.
I think so.
Yeah. But the good thing about what Jesus did was he's the master, he's the expert. He had all the right answers. He's done all the heavy lifting. He's told us what the right response is. So when we now encounter a situation where we have to come up with the right response, if we don't rely on the teachings of the church, which are the teachings of Jesus Christ, then we're on our own. And I think that's where people just simply, they're paralyzed. Because one, they don't know what to say. Two, if they think they know what they want to say, they may be afraid to say it because, as you said, it hurts and they don't want to deal with conflict. But I guess the most comforting thing about my faith, my Catholic faith, is that all the answers have been worked out. And I just simply have to find what the church teaches on a particular subject, apply it to the current event or, the situation I'm dealing with. And I feel like I'm standing on very strong ground. I don't have to make excuses for saying what I'm saying because it's 2,000 years of tradition. The catechism is just, Catholic teaching is so rich and deep that I feel very comfortable in taking that position and arguing that position or presenting that, not necessarily arguing, but presenting that way of handling the situation. I mean, to me, it's the best thing that you could have. It's like a trouble guide or a roadmap to all the different places where people can get lost, and this just helps you find your way out.
Yeah. That is true. Like, really, what the church teaches and what our Lord Jesus himself taught us directly in the Bible. With Jesus, the response that Jesus had to people who demanded a miracle, who demanded things from him, he did not do it. We see, we hear about how good he was, and he definitely was good. He is God. God is all good. But he did not acquiesce to people demanding or insisting he do certain things. There were places that he went to that the Bible tells us he performed very little miracles or cured very few people, very little healing because of the lack of faith of the people there. And then when we see him when he is brought before Herod, Herod mocks him, taunts him, perform a miracle, do this, do that. Does Jesus do anything for him? No, he does not. He does not acquiesce to people's demands. He heals people because he is good, because he loves us, but he will not let himself be bullied or used.
Yeah, and we've talked about he was Jesus was meek, and our definition of meek in past shows was strength under control. He was always the strongest person by far in any group that he found himself in, but he did not use, he remained meek and humble. And I think we are the beneficiaries of that because now we see the lesson that comes out of that encounter with Pilate or Herod or any of the Pharisees. It's just like the woman that was about to be stoned for adultery. What does he do after everybody leaves? He said he did not condemn her, but go and sin no more. He had a perfect way of balancing that she was forgiven. He did not condemn her, but he also told her, don't do it again, sin no more. So he just, the stories in the Bible about how he dealt with the crowds and all the hot shots of the day is just amazing. It's just genius. And that's why I just have such confidence in his teachings, again, through the church. And I guess the only shortcoming I have sometimes is a situation. I just don't know the right Catholic response to it, but I have access to it. I could always talk to a priest about it. I could talk to some other people in the church, even you, because we all have our own understanding and our own knowledge through, different avenues. And so you go to other people that have a strong faith and have a good understanding of church teaching. So if you don't have an immediate response to someone, you can say, let me get back to you on that, and then go find it. But it's there. I can't imagine anything that would come up in a group discussion that the church could not respond to in a good, solid way. That's just my, acceptance of how strong the church teaching is and how much it means to me and being able to deal with other people.
Yeah, I agree that there's that Catholic teaching can give us the answer, the response to anything. However, people might not like that answer. That's really where it goes. People might not like it. They might not understand it, but they might not want to understand it, because even if they don't understand something or it seems unfair or unreasonable, if they actually were open to finding out more, to actually delving into a certain teaching, they would find that it is, in fact, like you said, it's reasonable. It's, that's where we get the answers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not only that, I actually think that some people, if they're searching for the truth, and you kind of hit on it there, if people are searching for the truth and you give them an answer, and even though it's an awful tasting answer to them, they might not show that, oh, you hit a nerve here. They may just walk away and you think, well, he or she has not changed their position. But they may go do some research because you hit a nerve. And if they're searching for the truth, that will be, your answer will be something that will gnaw at them until they go and clarify it one way or the other. And I think that's what happens to a lot of converts, even agnostics and atheists, is they get that one challenge, and they're going to prove you wrong because of your answer. And when they start doing their research, that's when they start to learn things that they never considered before. And before you know it, they're on their way to becoming a believer. And a lot of the well-known Catholic authors and spiritual leaders of today started off as an atheist or in another religion. And something triggered a need to know about something they heard about Catholicism. And once they put their toe in, they cracked the door open, they had to go all the way. It was just an amazing process. And they're the first ones to admit it, how adamant they were against the church. But once learning about it, they became some of the most devout Catholics on the planet.
Yeah. That's what you said. The truth is powerful. It does hit a nerve, as you said. And you can also liken it to, it plants a seed that of unquenchable desire.
Yeah.
And this seed that it plants, it can remain tiny and hidden, even for as long as a decade or two or more, but it's there because the truth cannot be denied, it cannot be destroyed. And when you hit a nerve, that just means that person, it's going to find it very, very, very difficult to deny it, very difficult to ignore it. It's going to plant that seed there that sooner or later is going to sprout. Mm-hmm. With the right circumstances. And the more little seeds, the more nerves that are hit with the truth, with these little seeds of truth, the more that go into somebody throughout their lives, the harder it will be for them to keep on denying the truth. And I think this is where, prayer is so powerful that when we pray for somebody, it is like God is shooting out these little seeds, these little pellets into their soul, into their heart. Our prayers are like little tiny bullets going into people's, perhaps their minds as well as their souls and their hearts. And the more little tiny seeds, they're so tiny, but the more that go into this person, into his or her being, the harder it is for them to resist. The harder it is for them to deny the truth which is that God is real and that God loves us.
Yeah, and I've experienced that not only in my spiritual life, but also in learning the early days of my engineering topics subjects. These are tough classes, and I'd hear something, okay, kind of makes sense. I don't really understand it. And something would happen weeks later, or it could even be a year later. Or it could be I heard it in college, didn't make any sense to me, but when I got on the job around people that were applying it every day, knew more about it, all of a sudden the light bulb came on. But the only reason the light bulb came on is because of that seed, as you called it, that was planted long ago. So it was there. It was dormant, but something happened later that caused it to just blossom. And then that's, you talk about a being happy, going back to the earlier part of the show. Well, that is a true source of happiness, is learning about things. Because now you own it. It's not something like a bowl of ice cream that after you finish it, it's done. This learning, this that you've just accomplished here, even though it took a long time to get there, is now something that's part of you, and it's the springboard for the next level of learning. And that's where the happiness comes in. And like I said, if you've got everything in balance, you'll have the joy and also the pleasure, as you were talking about earlier, about doing the right kind of work. That's how these things all happen, whether it's spiritual or in the natural here, whether it's dealing with our families or the job or whatever. These seeds are so important, but the bottom line is you got to be looking for the truth. You can't be denying it because it doesn't match up with your current way of thinking. You've always got to be open-minded to, there's more to this than I know. Just let me sort out what I should be listening to versus something that I should be, researching or following up on. That to me is looking back at how it's worked for me, and it's worked quite well. So I don't know, maybe other people do it a different way.
I like what you said, yeah. Where you can actually get pleasure too when you're feeding your mind, your intellect, when you're learning things. And actually, though, I wanted to say too, we are pretty much heading towards the end of the show, so we can wrap up. I'll say a few things, and then you can finish off. What I wanted to say was that with learning new things, it's really food for thought. I mean, there's actually a term for that, food for thought. And then, of course, we have the food for the body, which gives pleasure. But there's also food for the heart, and those are the emotional connections, so important in every human being's life. And then over and above every other one is the food for the soul, the spiritual element. And we need to be fed spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, and also materially or physically.
Yeah. Well, there's that balance we keep talking about, and as long as you've got the balance in mind and know where to find the answers, I think you're in good shape. Not that life will be easy, but you'll appreciate the days when you don't have much water to give to thirsty horses.
Yes, which brings us back to the opening.
Yeah, exactly. You'll really appreciate the day where you just turn on the faucet and the bucket fills up. So, but sometimes it takes a little pain to fully understand all of that and appreciate it. So, Maria, I think unless you have something, I think we pretty much covered the topic for the day. And are you all set?
I'm all set for the day. Yep.
Okay, then. Let's close with a prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Amen. Take care, Maria. Have a good week.
You too, Dave. Bye-bye. God bless everybody.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
To a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.